We are putting wild back into the path of the Wild Magic Barbarian. Guys, this is my favorite subclass in all of Dungeons and Dragons. So I had to do my own homebrew thing to it because the current rules as written Barbarian subclass, Path of the Wild Magic, it just doesn't really do it for me with as much as I love Wild Magic. If you guys know anything about me at all in my homebrew craziness, Wild Magic speaks to me at my core. I have a whole video doing a D300 Wild Magic system that I have, and I took the Wild Magic Sorcerer to the next level and actually had its Wild Surges happen more than just once every 10 sessions or something with the current rules as written. I love 5th edition, but its Wild Magic system across the board of the table, the Sorcerer, and now the Barbarian just were a little underwhelming, and it was not truly the spirit of Wild Magic that I thought it was. So I took the D50 table technically because it's not really a D100 if each two things count as one. But anyway, I took that to a 300, made it crazy. That's a whole, again, all of the links to everything will be down in the description. I have an entire PDF. The sponsor of this video is the PDF that I made. It's down on my website. Anytime I do a video over this stuff to give a whole system like this, I always put the PDF on sale for the month of this video. So there's a sale going on right now for it. Pick it up for yourself if you haven't already. But in that PDF is the full Wild Magic system and how I run it at my tables, the D300 table, subclasses for Bard, Warlock, Rogue, bunch of other subclasses, the remix of Sorcerer, and the star of this video, the Wild Magic Barbarian, my favorite subclass that I've ever made. And if I ever get to be a player at any table ever, I'm doing this in a campaign. I am. How this video is going to work. And I would love to do more of these videos. These are the type of videos that I would eat, sleep, and bleed for. Is I want to present the original, whatever it is, whether it's a class or a subclass, and then break down some of my thoughts of where my head's coming from whenever I make tweaks and changes as far as why I'm changing it or why I even think it needs to be changed in the first place. And then the second part is actually what the final product is of all that picture. I'll have the timestamps down if you don't really care about the other one. You just want to see the new shiny one. Oh my God, go, go, go. Then that will be linked in the description. You can see where that whole thing starts in the little convenient timestamps down below. But if you do like these kind of videos, like the video, comment, share it around, whatever, because these videos do take a lot more time to completely remake a subclass and or I want to do classes in general. So the more love these kind of videos get, the more I do want to do them. So we'll see how that goes. And with that, let's get into the rules as written Barbarian and some things that just don't sit right with me. All right, so here we go. We got our Tasha's Cauldron of everything here. 3rd level, Wild Magic Awareness. As an action, you can open up your awareness to the presence of concentrated magic. Okay. Until the end of your next turn, you know the location of any spell or magic within 60 feet of you that isn't behind total cover. When you sense a spell, you learn which school it belongs to, which I'm a little fuzzy on that one. We'll get to that here in a second. You can use this feature a number of times, equal your proficiency bonus, get back on a long rest. In general, to me, this feels fine. And I think this is very similar to Detect Magic already, so I don't know why they don't just do Detect Magic. Spoiler alert, that's kind of what I did, is just let them use Detect Magic. Also, the coming back proficiency bonus per long rest. For Barbarians, I see them getting things back as a short rest. I think this works better as a less amount of times and they get it back per short rest. But for me, from a game design standpoint, since a lot of Barbarians get stuff back on a short rest, I went ahead and lumped this as a short rest too. And if it comes back on a short rest, then I don't want to give them proficiency bonus amount of times. So I just have it be a flat 2. But we'll get into my system here in a second. In general, no matter what, with this Wild Magic Barbarian, they don't know magic, in my opinion. It's wild, it's crazy. They can't control it, or if they did control it, it wouldn't be so wild, you know what I'm saying? So I don't necessarily like them knowing the school of magic. I like it being described as that it's magic or not. That's up to you as a dungeon master. In my system, and the one that I published, I said Detect Magic. But I would also add a little clarification right here with the Wild Magic Barbarian that's in my campaign right now. I do whole breakdowns on my second channel, Dungeon Coach Plays, link in the description. But with all of that, whenever that player uses this feature, they just can sense magic and they can't really get a good read on it or not. As they level up, I will also level up my descriptions of magic. And as their wild magic happens, they'll start to be a little bit more familiar with different spots. So if they've had a wild magic surge towards nature and plant magic, maybe they would be more apt to understand it if they were to detect it. But overall, magic awareness, I think, is a great 3rd level flavor type feature thing. Feels good. Okay, cool. Moving on to the next one. Wild Surge is what they get next. And this is the class defining thing that they get at their 3rd level. Now, I do like the D8 table that they provide. I think it's a great table. I think that's mostly all solid options, but my only thing is it's only a D8. And then the biggest problem I have is sometimes they rage and this thing happens and then there's no other effects going on. And I really like the concept of this rage causing them to have a permanent effect on them in some way that's different from this rage. In Critical Role, I'm doing breakdowns on that on this channel right now. I brought him back from the dead. We're doing them again. But Ashton, he is a homebrewed crazy barbarian subclass. He has a D4 that he rolls, and he gets passive effects in each of those 4 spots. In my Wild Magic Barbarian, there are 20, a D20. You roll a D20 because, man, it's a D20. Come on. And when you roll that D20, there's an active effect that happens, like a lot of the things in this book, but then there's also a passive effect that happens, right? Now, there's a whole balance to it, and the active thing that happens isn't absolutely crazy, and in some ways, it's wild. It could actually hurt things and maybe even be unideal, like wild magic should be. And in general, that's this table. There's not a lot of craziness. In the wild magic table, it's wild because maybe something bad could happen. And that, I think, is very, very much missing from this barbarian in the rules as written. I want there to be some sort of instability to it, especially low-level barbarians. Whenever they rage, they might not be able to control what happens with their rage, and it could go bad, which I think is missing from the wild element of this thing, right? So I would much rather prefer a wild system that could be a little bit more unpredictable, has 20 options as opposed to 8, has an active and a passive effect, compared to a more consistent table that's always good and there's only 8 options. And then, yeah. And let me clarify real quick about these rages. They do have passive effects. Some of them have an active and a passive effect. Some of them are just passive. So I like the consistency of you rage and something happens and then there's a lingering effect. So they do a great job of having that lingering effect for the rage. So I do want to clarify that, but I think there's just a little bit more wild that you could get with it. So overall, for the rules as written, Wild Magic Barbarian, level 3 is great. I would rank it at one of the top. I love it, love it, love it. And that the love I have for what they did at 3rd level is what caused me to take this subclass and run with it for where things start to get here now at 6th level. Because at 6th level, you get bolstering magic, which is you can harness your magic, bolster yourself for a companion. As an action, you can touch a creature, which could be yourself, and confer one of the following benefits. For 10 minutes, the creature can roll a D3. D3. Oh, come on. I know that's a D6 divided by 2, but still, that's just weird. That's just clunky to me. Come on. They can roll a D3 whenever making an attack roll or ability check and add the number to the roll. So it's basically like a blessed type guidance situation, which I don't see wild magic. That's not wild to me. This isn't wild magic anymore. It's now a buff of some kind. It's like a guidance bless buff. Like, wait, what? Or they could instead roll a D3. There's that D3 again. And the creature regains 1 expended spell slot, the level of which equals to the number rolled. Then there's some balancing things about once a creature receives this benefit, they can't do it until a long rest. And then you can do this action, this choice of actions, a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you can reset it on a long rest again. This does not now, it is left the wild magic to me. This does not feel wild anymore. You're now like a battery to your allies to regain spell slots, because you as a barbarian won't have one unless you're subclassing it, which is interesting because you could use the action on yourself. You could be a battery spell slot provider for your allies, which that's, in my opinion, not the class fantasy of a wild magic barbarian. That's a curveball. That's weird. And then the other one is a buff / guidance type thing. That's not wild. What? Both of those are way too consistent and strange to me, so I just ultimately, I don't even like them at all, and I completely left them in the dust. Moving on to the next one is Unstable Backlash, which is interesting. When you're impaired during your rage, the magic within you lashes out. Immediately after taking damage or failing a saving throw while raging, you can use your reaction to roll on the wild magic table and immediately produce the effect rolled, and this replaces your current effect. Now, this is good. This is good. Number 10, level 10, great. I took this inspiration and did run with this part as far as I try and pay respects to 5th edition anytime I homebrew stuff, and I try not to just go off the deep end unless I literally scrapped everything from 6th level. It just didn't make sense to me at all. But 10th, I like this. You can, under certain circumstances, trigger another rage. I do think it's interesting that there's not a limitation to it. It just uses your reaction, and then you can roll on the table again, and something else crazy will happen. So that is cool. That doesn't feel broken or anything. I'm not worried about that. It just is a little different than how I issued it out in my system. But we'll get to that later. So number 10, I like the 10th level stuff. But moving on to 14th level now. Controlled Surge. And now this mechanic, if you've seen my sorcerer video, the video for the sorcerer will be down in the description, but I hate the roll twice on the magic search table and then choose. That's not what really wild magic to me. I just don't like that. It just doesn't speak to the fantasy of wild magic to me, to where it's unstable and you can't control it. And then you get to now, how do you describe that as a dungeon master? You feel these two different things. You feel this surging up within you and you feel this surging up within you, and you choose to allow this to wash over you and take over. It's just weird to explain, right? And then also slows down the game because now they have to roll twice, and then you're like, all right, well then the second one, level 2, the teleport thing is number 2, and then I also got a 6, which until your rage ends, you're surround, and like they have to read 2 options and then choose between them, and it just slows down the game. So no, thank you, no. And then if you roll the same number, you can just choose off the table. So I just don't like I don't like representing control over wild magic in this way. In my system, I do implement levels of control to where they can start to control the chaos. I think that is part of the class fantasy of a wild magic anything. Wild magic sorcerer, wild magic whatever, is they gain more and more control as they level up over this wild magic. I think that is a key feature in the story arc of this character, but not in this way where it just slows down the game like I just said. It's just not the way I would want to implement it. So how do I want to implement it? Let's now get into this Wild Magic Barbarian. So now for this Wild Magic Barbarian, it is part of the PDF. If you've already bought the PDF before on the website in like months past, I am sending it back out to everyone because I'm adding just the Wild Magic Barbarian into the subclass. I'm sending it back out with a new shiny cover. Victronicon is an amazing artist, and look at this cover. It's Alcander from Alcander's Almanac is on the cover of this thing. It's just oh, I'm so excited. So if you've already purchased it from my website, then you are getting this Wild Magic Barbarian for free, essentially. I'm just updating it, and you'll send the file. You'll get an email of it. I'm also giving it out to all my patrons during this month that this video goes live as a thank you to just my patrons being patrons. But if you're neither of those two things, the PDF will be down in the description for this entire Barbarian situation, because I'm going to show you the thought on Homebrew of what this whole thing is. But if you want to get the full thing for yourself, check it out. So first up at 3rd level is Arcane Sight, which is basically the same thing. You cast Detect Magic and it resets on a short rest. I already talked about my thoughts on how I do like the 3rd level features of the original Rules as Written Barbarian. I switch it to Detect Magic, and the only difference really there is instead of 60 feet, it's 30 feet, which I think feels more accurate for a barbarian to have to be closer. They don't have a great sense too far. It's only 30 feet, and they can sense the school of magic and magical things and stuff. Cool. And then I also add in my own dungeon mastering on top of that I don't tell them exactly the school unless they have some sort of familiarity with it based on stuff that's actually happened with that character and their wild magic surges. So now we get to the big awesome feature, this whole thing, Wild Magic Rage. I had to have this thing be bigger than just a D8. It's a D20 list. So on this D20 list, I'm going to show you a excerpt here. In fact, I'm going to roll 4. We got number 3, Exploding Energy Orbs. So there's 4 tables of this thing. The first table is the theme of the table, which gives a dungeon master a quick glance at it and they see Exploding Energy Orbs. So that triggers their mind to just be in the right headspace of what this thing is. The second column is a visual representation so that the dungeon master can kind of paint a picture of what this thing's looking like before they get into actually what the actual active or passive effect is. So for Exploding Energy Orbs, you release orbs of unstable energy that orbit around you. This is just enough to give the dungeon master a quick little flavor description of kind of what things are looking like before they get into the third column, which is the active effect of what happens. Every single one of these rages has an active effect. The moment it's used, the active effect happens. So for this one, you hurl 3 orbs at random points determined by the dungeon master. These points are within 30 feet of you, and each creature within 5 feet of that point must make a dexterity save, and if they fail, they take 2 times your proficiency bonus in damage. So now as soon as they rage, 3 energy orbs shoot out from them in whatever way you want to paint that picture, but they are hitting anything determined by the dungeon master. Remember that point. We're going to come back to that later in these further things. Remember when I said about the barbarian needs to be able to control their rage or show control over their rage? Right now, in parentheses, it says determined by the dungeon master. That's going to change here in a second. But at first, they're going to use this, and it might hit an ally. It might hit something, but it's not crazy amounts of damage here. It's just 2 times your proficiency bonus, which does scale with your level. Because this is a pretty big area, because that's 3 different points and the area around it. But then we also have a 4th column that has a passive effect of this interesting type of rage property. So for this one, whenever you take an attack action, you can forego 1 attack to instead hurl an orb at a point within 30 feet that you can see. I love this mechanic because as an action, if they're below level 5, they can just take their action, and instead of making an attack, they can throw an energy orb. How crazy is that for this wild magic barbarian? But then at 5th level, they have an extra attack, so they get 2 attacks now. Basically, this means they can sacrifice one of those to use this cool wild magic effect, and then they have a normal attack to use after that. And that theme stays through a lot of these different 20 of these options. A lot of them have this option of sacrificing an attack to make this cool wild magic version. So each creature within 5 feet of that point makes a dexterity saving throw, or it's the same type of concept from the active. So there's the big picture of what you get with all of these 20 options. A visual of what's happening with this wild magic barbarian, some sort of active effect that happens once they use it, and then a passive that lingers from there. Now, like I said, I did spend over a year on this wild magic barbarian, making this thing and polishing it off to get to the spot where it's at. But I do want to give the overall flavor and tell you what the theme is for at least each of these things. So real quick, we have a shadow tentacle that takes HP from people around it, allies or enemies, a teleport version, the exploding energy orbs, we just went over that one, ranged force weapon, which gives a throwing force weapon that you can bring back to your hand and like extend your weapon, and it adds force damage to your weapon, lightning return chain, positive force field of energy, difficult terrain, vines and nature that kind of comes around things, a blinding blast of radiant light, summoning a spectral entity of a berserker, an animal of some sort of spiritual entity to be able to fight with you in some way. The wild magic barbarian in my campaign right now had this happen where a creature killed them and they get unconscious, sorry. A creature knocked them unconscious and they were able to be brought back. And when they brought back, they raged again and they got number 9, which is spectral spirit summon thing. And the spirit summon that I randomly came up with was the creature that just killed them. They raged and that creature came around them, and then they had this creature fighting alongside them. The same creature that just took them down is now fighting alongside them. Super cool. And again, this is purposely made to be vague, to be some sort of spirit creature, so you can kind of let the wild magic go from there. Okay, back to it. Random elemental damage is number 10. Quickly movement speed buff. Enlarge, growing in size, number 12. Or shrinking, maybe, if you want to have it go crazy. Anyway, 13 is a ranged blaster of some kind. They add some sort of ranged elemental attack onto things. 14 is flying to some extent. Mind control or possession, 15. Invisibility, 16. You can see I'm hitting on all the different themes of magic in general. 17 is water manipulation and moving around, because we're hitting around all the elements here. 18, I love it, is healing and curing. We had, if you're staying up to date with the Dungeon Coach Plays channel, I give full breakdowns at every single session as far as from a Dungeon Master point of view, breaking it down. My barbarian player rolled an 18 for his wild magic, had this green energy flowing through his hands, and then he wanted to use it. I did not describe that this is a healing magic, and he used it on an enemy that he just hit and then healed them back up to full health. It was really awesome, perfectly fitting flavor of wild magic thing to do here, but he didn't even know that he was able to possibly heal as a barbarian. That's crazy. 19 is reflective magic, and then 20, y'all. 20 is a copy creature effect, and this is my favorite thing. This has not happened in the campaigns for me yet, but what this is it's something about a creature that's around you. You take on the properties of it. It's purposely vague, and that's not me trying to be lazy here. That's me inspiring you, hopefully, to be a little crazy, and whatever features of whatever they're fighting, he starts to take it on, right? If they're fighting a manticore, maybe they start to grow spines. If they're fighting a beholder, maybe they grow tentacles with eyes on them and they gain laser beams. This is a natural 20 on a barbarian wild magic surge table. Whew, it's got to be something. But I don't want to get too carried away and crazy with that, because that is infinite possibilities right there. The active effect should be something crazy based on the creatures around them, and the passive effect would be gaining some sort of feature based on the creatures around them. Oh, so now bringing it back down after the excitement of that table. I seriously, guys, I put so much in that of love into that table, and I can't wait to see someone out there play this thing. I don't know. Please let me know down in the comments or somewhere if you're using this thing, because I just love it so much. So for the 6th level feature now is Embrace the Chaos. While raging, you can use a bonus action on your turn to trigger the active effect of the result rolled on your Wild Magic Surge table. This means that active effect on that table of active and passive effects, that active effect triggers again. I really, really like this, because this is taking the same wildness that they are experiencing. They have this surge of energy of some kind of one of these 20 ways, and they have this big display of power in some way. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, depending. We'll get to that in a second. But they have this then smaller, weaker version version passively. But now at 6th level, they don't just have to settle for that passive lower level of thing they can do. They can then, as a bonus action, trigger the active again. I really love how the 6th level feature ties into the 3rd level feature, and it just feels right for being able to, in this case, not control it more, but they can tap into it more. And you'll see the story arc of what I'm saying of this character gaining control of their power. At first they have the power and it just happens, and then it lingers and they can do more stuff, and now they can control when it happens again. And it also says you can use this bonus action a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. Now that's what I've published out there, but how I'm running it right now at my tables, you can do the same thing as well, is I just have the barbarian use a rage charge. So the barbarian burns a rage charge and triggers it again. I just really like barbarians using their rage charges for something else besides rage, because they never run out of rages. And if they ever do, and I feel like that they don't have enough rages, I will bonus level up perk, give them more rage charges. But that's just my homebrew version. I didn't want to necessarily publish in this type of thing. I wanted to keep it a little bit more up to code, if you know what I'm saying. Because my last campaign, I had a Storm Herald barbarian that could use his rage charges for lightning type spell effects, which is crazy. But I do love the using a rage while raging to activate the active effect again. Now 10th level, here we go. You start to see that, you can see the inspiration that I was saying that I did like from the rules as written. Here's my version of it. Wild Magic Rebuke. When a hostile creature attacks you or forces you to make a save, so again, that's the same thing, you can choose to use your reaction and immediately enter a rage. This is huge for barbarians who have not entered combat yet and had a chance to take their rage. They're about to take damage. They can spend their reaction to immediately enter a rage, expending a rage to do so. So if you haven't raged yet, that's just an awesome thing in the first place, to be able to rage when it's not your turn. That's just awesome. I love that quality of life improvement for barbarians, especially past 10th level. But if you're already raging, you can instead expend your rage to roll again on the wild magic table. When you do this and roll again on the table, it triggers the active effect again from you. Again, you use the rage to do this, so that triggers the active effect again on the new version you got. And then now the new active effect goes off and you get the new passive effect from the new roll that you just got. And that entirely replaces the previous wild magic rage. And now another homebrew layer on top of this subclass is I let my player right now, if they choose the embrace chaos option from 6th level, if they use that rage charge, they can use that rage charge to now re-roll on that table and change their rage. Now they're not 6th level yet. They're not going to get that feature. They're level 5 right now. So eventually I will give that to them as a bonus level up perk, but I am planning on letting them do that on the 6th level embrace chaos feature as well, but I'll probably give them as a bonus perk around 7th level. But that's just me and my homebrew bonus perk dungeon master self. But now 14th level Chaos Conquer. This is how I feel like they should be representing control over their wild magic. So if you remember on that energy orb table, there was a section that said, Zach, put it up here somewhere to show that the dungeon master can choose where these things go. And on this D20 table, there's a lot of things that just say things around you, or the dungeon master chooses, or whatever. But now, watch this. When you use an active or passive effect from the wild magic rage table that affects one or more targets, you can now choose which targets within range are subject to the effect. So you now have control. These energy orbs that are just like shooting out of you, that's not something that's just going to be like, oh no, my friends, or the shadow tentacles, the natural one roll on the D20 table, the shadowy tendrils that take the life of those around you, you now can choose for them not to take the life of those people. No, it's just life. It's not killing. It's just the health and stuff. So you can choose for it not to happen. This is you having control over your wild magic to not hurt your friends. And I think is a much better representation of control than rolling on the table twice. Now, again, for this next part, I do not use this next part on my tables. And again, my player's not 14th level yet, but this is what I'm saying. I wanted to stay true to the rules as written. And a lot of times whenever I publish stuff for you guys and post things out there for 5th edition and stuff like that, I do want to stay true to 5th edition and pay respects where credit is due, right? So here's the next part, but let me give a disclaimer afterwards. Additionally, on the 14th level feature, when you roll on the wild magic rage table, you can choose to re-roll, but you must use the new roll. I feel like this is just a better version of the roll twice and then to choose one. I feel like it's a small subtle change, but I like the idea better of they roll on the table, here's what you get, and you start to describe. And as a dungeon master, I would just start to describe, you see energy orbs start to flow off of you. They could choose in that moment, do you want to take this or do you want to re-roll again, right? This is a much better, I feel like, description thematically of this energy as it's coming out of them. It's literally happening. They're starting to see it, and then they can choose if they re-roll it or not and get the effects of the other one that happens. So then let's say they do re-roll it, and then they re-roll on the table. Now it's this, and here we go, we're moving. There's not this like choice of like, oh, this or that, or what's the effects of this one, what's the effects of that. All I do is I say the visual. I do not describe what the thing was, especially if they haven't happened. And with a D20 table, there's gonna be a lot of rages that players could play a whole campaign and maybe not have hit some of these rages, so they might not know what this rage is. So all I describe is the visual effect and see what's coming out of them, and then do they reroll or not. I think that's a little bit better way to do it. But at my tables, I probably would not have this there, and they would just be able to 14th level control the rage that they have. What I would do is past 14th level, I would start to let them be able to control their rage, and certain rages that they really like, they might be able to access those a little bit better. But that would be something I'd work one-on-one through bonus level up perks with that player, and depending on the path that they're taking, which is my version of the path of the Wild Magic Barbarian. I don't know if you see the excitement in me while I'm just talking about this. I truly, truly love it. I want to see what you guys think. This is out there as far as wild magic goes. Let me know what you think about the table. Let me know if you use it. I can't wait to hear that. I've already heard many people talk about my wild magic sorcerer rework that I did, and then how they've used it, and it's actually triggering wild magic surges. God forbid a wild magic sorcerer has wild magic surges happen at least once a session. That's my goal, is having it happen at least once a session and not be so crazy. Again, all of those videos are down in the description. The PDF's down in the description. It's on sale right now because I really do want to have as many people get their hands on this as they can, and I appreciate everyone who does, because it really does support what I'm doing here. I got some big channel announcements coming about that, and about supporting what I do here with a lot of the big stuff that's happening. You know what? No, actually, I will say it right now. My wife is pregnant with our second kid. That's crazy, right? It's our second dungeon baby. So that's all crazy and happening right now. I thought it was a good time to announce the video. Wild magic speaks to me so much to share something like that with you guys. So that's going to be crazy. But I have another crazy announcement coming here in about, let's see, probably 3 weeks or so to tell you guys. 2 weeks? I don't know. Stay tuned. So until next time, stay wild and keep thinking outside that box. Peace.